Hello, everyone. I'm going to let everyone filter in before we get started. Welcome to Namely 2023. I am Michelle Chula-Lipkin, Namely's Executive Director. Thank you so much for joining us for this year's conference. Some of you might be joining your first Namely conference. Others might have joined us for every one we've had since 1998. Whomever you are, I welcome you and hope you have a wonderful, enriching time over the course of the next 2 days. You've registered for the conference because you are interested in media literacy education. Everyone here at Namely believes deeply in the importance of this work. We feel that media literacy education is an essential life skill and that we must act urgently and passionately to advance the practice of media literacy across the country and the globe. Whether you are a teacher, a librarian, a professor, a community organizer, a journalist, or a concerned citizens, we need you to join us as we work toward a media literate world. We are very proud of the program we have put together for you and organized for you this weekend. With over 50 sessions and 4 amazing keynotes over 2 days, we know there is so much amazing content to explore. And we took your feedback from last year and focused even more on K-12 educator sessions. The team has worked really hard on making this a great event, and I want to thank the Namely staff and conference team for making it all happen. You will recognize the team by these t-shirts. If you see someone in your session with one of these Namely shirts, they have answers to your questions or can point you in the right direction to get your answers. You'll have an opportunity throughout the weekend to meet our team and to hear more about what Namely has been up to. But now I'd like to run through some conference business with all of you. So first up, some conference tips. So there's lots of ways to connect and get information, and we recommend that you download the Namely program. We recommend that you chat with us in the platform lobby. There'll be lots of activity there over the next 48 hours. Please follow the conference on social media at #Namely23. And of course, if you have any questions, email us at conference@namely.net. Everything we do at Namely depends on collaboration and partnership. And I want to thank all of our members, our organizational partners, our National Media Literacy Alliance, and our board of directors. And now it is my pleasure to introduce Namely's new board president, Kimberly Moffitt, who will share some opening day remarks. Good morning, Kimberly.
Good morning, Michelle, and thank you so much. Welcome to Namely's 2023 conference, the largest professional development conference dedicated to media literacy education in the U.S. And I cannot think of a more opportune time. Technical difficulty, excuse me. And I cannot think of a more opportune time for us to come together, committed to media literacy, to learn and strategize about ways we can continue our efforts and ensure that we foster a media literate world. As technology continues to evolve and provide us wondrous access to the world, it also necessitates an engaged core of our principles that we talk about in Namely that enable us to decipher, explore, and analyze the media around us. Of course, the ongoing political divide in our nation, as well as recent Supreme Court decisions, raise questions about our interpretations of democracy, freedom, and belonging, and also exhibit a clear charge that we must continue to question and challenge information disseminated to us by media. As one who has spent the bulk of my academic career investigating the impact of mediated representation, specifically on children of color, I am most excited that this year's conference gives voice and platform to our youth, who are often the focal point of media's ills. We will learn how to engage the news, create our own media, and experience the works developed by youth organizations in hopes of replicating their efforts and fostering such opportunities in our own communities. I am both inspired and in awe of the works being created by our Gen Zers and look forward to learning as much from them as they do from us. Now, having served on Namely's board for the last 3 years, I am indeed honored to have the opportunity to serve as the next board president, along with Vice President Stephanie Flores-Coolish, Treasurer Mike Jackson, and Secretary Ann Collier, as well as the rest of our board. We are a mighty team charged with working alongside Michelle, our executive director, to elevate the efforts of Namely and engage even more educators, more parents, and more industries that can really tremendously benefit from our work. I look forward to the next few days of engagement, as well as our continued work together in the future. I now have the pleasure to introduce this year's conference co-chairs, our board members, Bill Selleck, as well as Matthew Woods. Good morning.
Morning.
Hey, good morning, Kimberly. Everybody, welcome. We're so excited to have you here. In this pivotal era, media literacy forms the bedrock of our interactions with the world. Shaping student creators for the digital age isn't just an aspiration. It's an essential commitment to transforming the landscape of education, technology, and even artificial intelligence.
Our keynote speakers exemplify this commitment in unique ways. The New York Times Learning Network innovatively turns news stories into educational resources, while #ICanHelp equips students to be digital first responders, navigating the online world responsibly. The Skillman Foundation emphasizes equitable education and after-school programs, reinforcing our dedication to social justice. BAVAC Media supports media makers, aligning with our mission to empower students to tell their own stories. A crucial part of our mission is the constant refinement of our approach to media literacy. We've updated our core principles of media literacy education, articulating 10 principles that symbolize the essence of media literacy. These principles are an insightful guide on the what and why of media literacy, offering you a robust framework for shaping your practice.
And as we explore the future of AI in education, let's use this conference as a platform for dialogue and growth. Together, we can turn students from consumers to creators, shaping a new generation ready to navigate the digital age. Welcome to this collaborative endeavor. Let's shape the future of media literacy together.
Thank you both so much. It's been an absolute pleasure to work through these last 3 months getting this together. Thank you so much, Bill and Matthew. So now, without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce our first keynote session, entitled Youth Rising, Fostering Creative and Meaningful Teen Engagement with the News with the New York Times Learning Network. So the New York Times Learning Network hears from tens of thousands of students a year. Through their daily student opinion forums and annual multimedia contests, they learn what young people think about everything from politics to pop culture, and prove over and over that the perspectives of young people are critical to cultural conversation. And in this session, the amazing Katherine Schulten will be joined by teen winners of the site's Coming of Age contest. Katherine and the teen winners will explore authentic ways in which young people can find themselves and their communities in the news, think critically about coverage, and most importantly, raise their voices to engage with what's happening in the world. And I have had the pleasure of knowing Katherine for years, and her commitment to this work is absolutely incredible. And I am so happy she can join us today. Welcome, Katherine. It is wonderful to see you.
Thank you, Michelle. I am so honored to be here, and I am so honored to kick off a conference that is so deeply focused on student voice. So thank you for asking me.
So I am going to leave you, and I will be back later for some Q&A. I'm looking forward to hearing all you have to share.
Okay, great. And I'm going to try sharing my screen, everybody. So wait a minute. Okay, I think it's happening. And I hope you guys can all see that. Let me open my chat and make sure if everybody, it looks good. Okay, that's what I want to hear. As I said, could not be more honored to be here, especially because our site, the New York Times Learning Network, is celebrating its 25th anniversary in August. And our staff has been super nostalgic this summer, thinking about how far we've come. For just one small example, back when we first launched in 1998, somebody in the New York Times newsroom decided that our site's signature color should be brown. Is it? I can't, sorry, I want to show you this picture. Brown, yes, and only brown. So if nothing else, we actually have a full color palette now. Our mission then and our mission now was to help people teach and learn with the news via Times content. But the main focus of our first decade was creating an elaborate daily lesson plan for teachers that helped them navigate front page headlines, as always for mostly middle and high school kids who could read the New York Times. For instance, if you needed help navigating for your 9th grade students what was happening between Bill Clinton and Monica Lewinsky, all right, Monica Lewinsky, in 1998, we had lots and lots of ideas. And at the end of the session, you'll actually get a handout that lists links to everything I'm telling you. So if you'd like to go down into that 1998 rabbit hole, you are welcome. It is still our job to help people teach and learn with the news, and our site is still free and outside the Times paywall. And we still post regular lesson plans about navigating tricky issues. For instance, this is a lesson plan that we put up in April this year. But we long ago learned that the most impactful way that we can use our platform and the privilege of being part of one of the most powerful newsrooms in the world is not lesson plans. Instead, it's coming up with as many ways as we possibly can to encourage and promote with our, relatively large platform, teenage voice about what's happening in the world. And of course, that doesn't just mean front page news. That means their thoughts on social media trends, sports, fashion, new music, TV, video games, mental health issues, relationships, anything and everything in the culture that they might be interested in. So if you haven't seen our site recently, here's what we look like now. This is content we had up at the end of the school year, at the end of May. I'm going to tell you more about what we do and how you can get involved if you want to. But first, I want you to meet 3 brilliant teenagers who are sharing this keynote with me. Before you see their work, though, I'm going to ask you guys 2 questions and ask you to respond in the chat. These are the same 2 questions that we asked teenagers to address last fall as part of our annual Coming of Age contest, in which we invite young people all over the world to just tell us or show us what it's like to grow up now. So as I post them, think about the young people you know. I think many of you here probably teach teenagers or are a parent or aunt or uncle, but even if you don't, all of you have read the myriad news articles reporting on this generation and the issues facing them. So here are the questions, and I'll give you a second, and I'll be moderating the chat, or I'll be monitoring the chat. So answer one or both. From your point of view, what's it like to be a teenager right now? How do you think the pandemic years have shaped and will continue to shape this generation? I'll give you a quiet second. Oh man, it is no surprise to me. Sorry, I easily get moved. You can ask the presenters. I gotta always fight not to cry. For you guys to be here on a July morning, on a Friday, saying these brilliant things is, yeah, thanks, Jennifer. Okay, right away, I see complicated, I see confusing over and over again. I see the barrage of information that, oh God, you guys forgive me. I really don't want to be like this. It's just, a hazard. They're more engaged, but more empathetic. I see a lot of positive stuff along with the negative stuff. Overwhelmed. They take in an enormous amount of information, most of which is beyond their understanding. I see people responding to their need for connection. I can't believe the stuff you're saying and how much it's going to resonate with the work that you guys are about to see. We haven't reckoned yet with what the pandemic has meant for them. Oh, really, this is awful. I'm going to get over this. Okay. And I'm going to now introduce you to some teenagers who responded to those same exact questions. They were 3 of the top 24 winners of our most recent iteration of our coming of age contest. They were invited to address those questions in any multimedia format they wanted, and nearly 3,000 students did. Each submission had to be accompanied by a short artist statement that explained how the piece was made and gave a little context about how it related to the questions we asked. You're about to meet 3 of the teenagers who will talk to more, but what you're going to hear first is them reading the artist statement that goes with their beautiful work. I'm going to go off camera, assuming I can figure out how to do that. Yes. And I'm going to invite to stage first Shashank Salgam from Albany, New York, who was 17 when he made this piece called Ring.
Hello, everyone. I'm Shashank, and I'm going to read out my artist statement for my piece Ring. This is me waiting for a friend to pick up the phone. I value human connection much more than I did prior to the pandemic, and I make it central in my routine. A simple phone call can be the bridge between worlds. Me and my peers were hit hard by the isolation of quarantine, but we're rebounding with a resolve to connect beyond boundaries. We strive to maintain and grow the web of interactions that keep us whole. My friends are by my side, recounting endless stories for as long as I'm on the line.
Shashank, thank you so much. Next, I'm going to invite to the stage, let me get it ready, Allison Kim from Demarest, New Jersey, who was 16 years old when she made this piece called But I'm Still Trying My Best.
Hello, I'm Allison, and this is my artist statement. COVID hit right before my middle school graduation, and I spent my freshman year of high school entirely on Zoom. My introvert self lived happily as a recluse for a year. My house became my warm, safe home, and everywhere else became intimidating, dangerous, and risky. I remember the beginning of my sophomore year as one of the most awkward months of my life, where I essentially had to relearn how to function around other people. I made the short, silly comic to voice my complaints in a lighthearted and hopefully relatable way. There's a limit to how much I can blame my failures on a one-year period that everyone else in the world also trudged through. So now all I can do is try my best.
Allison, thank you. Next and last, I'm going to invite to the stage Gigi Green from Boston, who was 15 when she made the piece We Are Watching. I will say that Gigi warned us that she might have a little trouble staying online. She kept getting kicked off. So if she can't be here, I might ask Allison, since you're still on, to read her piece if you're comfortable, or I can. I'll give her a second. Allison, would you like to read it? Oh, you don't, I don't think you have the, I'll do it because I don't think you have her statement, do you?
Yeah, it'd take me a while to look for it.
Okay, let me read what Gigi wrote and hopefully she'll be back on in time. Her statement reads, the very first Gen Z member of Congress was just elected. Our time is coming and we've been paying attention. My generation isn't all apathetic or uninformed. Even though many of my peers get their information from less than reliable sources, they're aware that something is going on. And of course, many of us are activists in our own right. In my digital drawing, I wanted to play with the imagery of a crowd filming something, because for my peers, that's a thing we do a lot. Something's happening? Anything? Pull out a phone. It also happens at concerts or other live entertainment, spectacles, just like American politics. During the pandemic, teenagers realized for the first time that politics had an impact on our lives. Even though our voices are not always heard, we are watching. Okay.
Thank you, Catherine.
Gigi, welcome. I'm going to invite all of you to the stage now, and you'll still see their beautiful work. Is everybody on here? And I maybe just can't see you. Think so. Okay, great. I'm going to invite you now to take a couple of minutes and tell us about your work, and I'm going to ask you to go in the order you just presented. So Shashank, just tell us, how did you decide what to submit to our contest? Like, why was that particular message so important to you?
When I was in quarantine, I think I struggled with a lot due to like restrictions and quotas on gatherings, was seeing friends outside of school, physically in person. So oftentimes I had to rely on like phone calls to keep in touch and just digital connection instead of a physical one. So I think this was emblematic of that time period.
Thank you. Allison, go ahead. What caused you to send what you did, to make what you did?
Yeah, so it took me like a couple of weeks to like come up with what I was gonna draw, but I was really like hooked on the idea of like trying to bounce back after the quarantine, but I just like didn't know what to do. And it actually like took so long for me to decide that I was like running out of time. So I just did a comic because I thought that would be quick, and I think it was pretty effective. Yeah.
I have to tell you that we put this work up on the New York Times homepage as well as on our own homepage, and these were very effective. Many people responded and said what a lot of you were saying in the chat about how much they related. Gigi, I'm going to give you a little extra time. Can you come on and talk about your work because you didn't get to read it?
All right. So what I really wanted to capture with my piece is kind of the intense, politically volatile environment that we're, coming of age in as teenagers, and kind of how, we're not seeing this secondhand, we're not seeing it firsthand all the time. Like, a lot of teenagers are not looking at news sources, NPR, the New York Times as their source of information, but we are still getting inundated with the news, even if it is secondhand, even if it is through somebody else's phone.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I don't know if you guys got to see, you were coming on stage. I don't know if you saw the profusion of people reacting to what you said and did and talking about how they feel that your generation's been affected. But we asked them, how do you think the pandemic years will continue to shape your generation? Can I have you guys take that on? How do you see it still affecting you and your friends and peers? I can't see all of you, so whoever wants to talk. Gigi, go ahead.
All right. I think that there's definitely still a sense of like the time we lost, like at least in my mind, it's kind of like this little rabbit hole that I skip over in my memory a lot. And then I think back and I'm like, whoa, a lot of stuff happened during that time. And I think the results of that isolation and, just the pseudo online world that we all lived in for that time will, the repercussions will still be coming.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I agree with that sentiment, but also I think in a more positive light, there was a lot of growth that happened during this time. And I feel like quarantine gave an opportunity to really introspect and look within ourselves, because even though we weren't able to see our friends and oftentimes even our family, we're able to develop by ourselves and come out stronger on the other side.
Thank you. Allison, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, like I think pretty much everything has been said already, but definitely like quarantine definitely like shaped who I am today, and it gave me a lot of time to think by myself. And also now that like we're out of quarantine, I'm more grateful for the experiences I'm able to have. So I think it is like positive. So that's good.
Thank you. I am now, you guys have teed me up perfectly, because what I want to do now is give people a little more context about this project, which is ongoing and which is, and all of you are invited to. So I'm going to have the three of these students will come back later, but for now I'm going to invite them to go off stage, and I'm going to show you a little more work. The Coming of Age project started in 2020 in the fall, because we run, I'll be telling you later about our many contests, but we run 10 a year, and that fall we were like, what the hell, what are we going to do? Like, how are we going to ask teachers and students to do a regular old contest as if it's 2019 when the world's been upended? So we ran our most open-ended challenge ever, had no idea what we'd get. We basically said, send us anything you want that tells us in writing, in images, in audio, in video, screenshots, you know, text messages, anything you want that can give a little insight into how you've dealt with this year. As a result, we have an enormous collection of extraordinary work. It's not just art, which is mostly what I'm showing here, but poetry, essays, diary entries, lists, charts, videos, podcasts, songs. One student sent a recipe, something he made for his father that helped him get over COVID. Many students sent rants. I'll show you some of the representative work very quickly. So from 2020, you'll be unsurprised that a lot of what we got was about isolation, was about quarantine. This is by Sunina Chen, who was 16 at the time. Another piece, this one by Camila Salinas, who was also 16. But as you just heard from these kids who you know, so movingly talked about resilience and, you know, the time they got to become who they are a little bit, we got a lot. I mean, maybe a third of the submissions were upbeat. This is a representative one. This is by Chloe Kim, who was 14 at the time, and it's kind of a real 2020 in joke, because if you look closely, you'll see that that is toilet paper she's climbing. So it takes you back. The other piece of 2020 that we heard an enormous response on will be no surprise to anybody here, the Black Lives Matter movement. I'll get weepy again. As Gigi said, 2020 really woke kids up. So many students told us that, really, forgive me, God, that they kind of understood for the first time that their voices politically mattered, from going into the streets that summer, and then there was the election that fall for those who could vote. So I'm only showing you one piece, but we got many, many, many on this. In 2021, when we ran the contest again, no surprise, much of what we got dealt with, and this is a gift, so I'm going to play it a few times for you, dealt with lingering mental health effects. Isn't this so cool, but so devastating? Students that year also talked about what one of these students said, and what you guys said in your responses about watching things live that you and having access to so much information you can't understand all the time. So this is by a 13-year-old named Courtney Duffy, and it's about watching the January 6th events live and just trying to make some sense out of what she was seeing. There's so much work that Norton has made a whole book of it, which comes with a full curriculum and all kinds of ways that you can do this in your own classroom or in your own community. I hope all of this stuff at one time or another appeared on the New York Times homepage, so that, I mean, millions of people that wouldn't ordinarily see teen work got to see teen work, the privilege of what our site can do. And because of that, we got lots and lots of comments from adults. And I thought this one, which is on the most recent collection that includes the work of the three kids we're talking to today, she said, "This is brilliant. There's such a range of thoughtful and emotionally honest response. To this older adult, it's very heartening. The news paints a far grimmer picture of their outlook than most of these kids do." And that I picked because it really goes to why the Learning Network exists. Of course, the New York Times never stops reporting on Gen Z across sections. And we use that reporting in our news quizzes, in our lesson plans, in all kinds of ways. But our site's the only place on nytimes.com where kids can speak for themselves, especially on issues that directly affect them. As Michelle said, we hear from tens of thousands of kids around the world every year. And what we learn always complicates what we adults thought we knew. So I'm going to show you a couple ways quickly that we do that because I want to get back to the kids in a minute. If you know our site, then you probably know this. Every school day since 2009, we've posted a question that's inspired by a Times article and asked kids to weigh in publicly in our open forum, for which you don't need a subscription. You just come on and comment. This is a screenshot from April, so you can kind of see the mix. Like if we ask a very serious question, like what's going on, around legislation around transgender use, we're also going to ask a really silly question that week, like this one tied to standing in the rain for a Taylor Swift sweatshirt. What would you wait all night in the rain to buy? Kids come on and pick what they want to answer, and we get many, many, many responses. Every one of these links to a free Times article, and we kind of try to push gently to ask kids to think, a little news literacy, right? Think about what do you think of this reporting? Is anything missing? How do you connect it to yourself and to your own communities? What's your opinion? How could you support that? It's all gently in there, but this is a very informal forum, and we're not checking grammar. It's just kids kind of having fun and answering. One thing we've learned from experience, it's almost a cheat for us now, is if we ask a question and we ask kids to push back against adult assumptions, they go crazy. This one got nearly 800 comments. What don't adults understand about teen life online? And again, you're going to have all these links if you want to look. Here's what the comments look like. There's no way you can see from this screenshot, but if you could, you'd see it said a student from Pennsylvania is answering, a student from Taipei is answering, a student from Colorado is answering, and that we moderate these comments. Almost never do we refuse one. It's only if somebody curses somebody out that we refuse them. And we just love to watch kids kind of thinking in real time through complex issues. One thing we always talk about is that when adults come on our site, which they don't really belong there, and we gently lead them away, but they have much more hardened talking points than students. Young people are just willing to live in the contradiction in a much, much better way that makes it a joy to moderate their comments. Every week we do a kind of digest of usually there's a question that just really hits. So every week we make a kind of digest of the range of kid thought on that. When I say kid, I mean 13 to 18. That's really our sweet spot. So for example, when that CDC report on teen sadness came out, of course we asked, and we got many, many responses. Kids have and continue to have tons to say about ChatGPT. And if you're going to read any of these, I really recommend What Teenagers Think Will Make Us Cringe in the Future. That is the funniest and wisest forum we've run in a long time, I have to say. So we are going to do a kind of live version of that now, and I'm going to stop sharing. Yeah, and invite my three co-panelists back on. And yes, hello. All right, perfect. So you saw that 800 kids responded to that question about what adults don't understand about how they live their lives online. I'm going to ask you a kind of companion question. They were just spitballing, right? They're just typing into the ether. The three of you are actually addressing media literacy educators right now. So what would you want to say to them about media literacy and how adults should address it? And I'm actually going to call on Gigi to start us off.
All right. I think the main, most important thing as a teenager who knows, I interact a lot with my peers, obviously. The number one thing that we need in order to become media literate is a stake in why we're becoming media literate. There needs to be a reason beyond a vague, for the greater good of democracy. There needs to be something concrete that we can apply to our own lives about why we need to understand and analyze the media that we consume.
Thank you. Can you suggest any reason?
I mean, for me, fascism is a great deterrent to consuming things mindlessly. It's really concerning to me that all of the book banning that is happening across the country, especially because it's a small, organized effort. It's really concerning to me that that is something that can just happen, that it doesn't take that many people So I think it's really important to look into the news reports and see, oh, this isn't a widespread thing. Like this is several people, putting forth hundreds of book ban requests.
Thank you, Gigi. Anybody else?
I agree. I think Gigi brings up the culture wars as a really good example. And I see stuff like that in the news all the time, from Ron DeSantis and Disney fighting it out, or anti-trans legislation being passed in multiple states across the country. Sometimes it can get very disheartening to see what ignorance can lead to across the nation when people are fed lies or mistruths. And I think media literacy education would be really important across the country, across all political boundaries, because it could help clear up misconceptions that people might have about whole groups of people and lead to less ignorance. So.
Thank you. Allison, you want to add to this?
Yeah, I definitely think media literacy is super important to teach in school, because with kids these days, or like our generation, we're definitely on the internet more, and also with the rise of short form content like TikTok, Reels, like I think we're getting, like the information we're getting is like in smaller increments, and it's like easier to get misinformation, and also people are just spreading around news and like gossip with like buzzwords attached that are like sometimes just unnecessary, and they just blow things out of proportion. And I think it's important, especially for our generation, to know media literacy, because we're always navigating the internet, and with like the like recent developments in like technology. So I think it's really important.
Like Barbara Harrison says, these students are more informed than some adults, a pleasure and a hope. So I think you guys have nailed the problems, and I think we all know the problems, but what I want to ask you, and this gets at what some people in the chat are asking too, what could help? What media literacy lessons have you ever had in school or out, even if they're self-taught, that helps you navigate information in a healthy way?
I think definitely
I mean, I haven't had a ton of.
Gigi,
go on,
Allison
Allison.
started to answer. I'm going to let her go first, and then you. Go ahead, Allison.
Okay. So like I think definitely just like normalizing more, and like just gradually and naturally adding more conversations about media literacy in school would be super helpful, because I feel like in my experience it's been limited to only like making sure you have credible sources for like essays or projects and stuff, but it's not really like in relation to our like experiences outside of school. Like if it was more connected to recent events or connected to specific things that teens would know about, it would be more helpful.
Thank you. Gigi, go ahead.
As I said, I haven't had a ton of media literacy education in school, but I think that, I mean, maybe having a whole class dedicated to media literacy, critical thinking especially, and like just figuring out what current events are happening and how that's been impacted by the things that have happened before, and just putting everything in context and helping students train themselves to be able to do that would be so helpful.
A whole class. I'm sure everybody here is like, here, yes, a whole class. Shashank, go ahead.
I'd say, like, in my experience outside of school, when I'm dealing with like the news, which can be like a constant battering of negative information, oftentimes I find that newscasters like to put like outrage bait, clickbait type headlines, and sometimes it's like taking something that isn't as big as it should be and blowing it out of proportion. But you'd only know that if you dive deeper and did some of your own research into the issue, instead of just reading headlines, or even if you just read the article itself. So I think just diving a little deeper on your own can always help out.
Well, I think you guys probably do it better than many, based on the things you've sent into our site and what you've said here. Thank you. These guys will be back, and I know that some of you have questions for them and you'll have a chance to ask them. I'm gonna give you a tiny bit more context. Again, sharing the screen. Yes, share. Okay. You have seen how our site, yeah, there we go. Okay. You have seen how our site, oh guys, sorry. All right, there we go. I showed you how we have kind of daily questions. That's a sort of low stakes way that we try to get kids all over the world to join. We also do something that is much higher stakes, but it's also much, much more powerful. And you've seen an example of it with coming of age. It is the biggest use of our time and resources, and it's also honestly our honor to do it. Oh, here I go again. We run 10 contests a year, and the art you see here is from the 2021 coming of age contest. You probably recognize Courtney Duffy's piece right there. Like every group that you're going to hear from at this conference, of course, we want to encourage young people to make media, not just consume media. We also know that even though teenagers are wildly effective on their own channels at getting their messages out, right? We also know that our role is as a bridge to the classroom, and asking classroom teachers to help kids make media, we have found teaches more media literacy than any other thing, because you have to learn it to do it. So each of our contests works the same way. We ask kids to look at excellent New York Times models in whatever genre they'll be working in as kind of mentor texts. And then we help them figure out what lessons can they take from it? What do they want to say, and how do they want to say it? All of our contests are judged in part by people in the newsroom who know that content and specialize in that content. So a lot of teachers tell us that that's why they send their kids to us, because it provides a kind of authentic audience. So for instance, our recent podcast contest is judged by the Times Audio team, among others. And our regular, we'll be running both of those again this year, our regular tiny memoir contest, we completely ripped off from Modern Love Stories. And the team at Modern Love helps us judge. We ask kids to write 100-word memoirs. So kids also retain the copyright to anything that wins our contest. And that's important because they go on to have such a second life. Local newspapers often cover these kids, and we've had students paid to have their work appear in textbooks and curriculums and in all kinds of books, all kinds of things. So again, our privilege to have the platform to do that. Whenever we run a contest, we have a vast curriculum that goes with it. So for instance, our editorial contest shows kids how to use Good Times mentor texts to marshal reliable evidence to make a really compelling argument. We have just finished judging that, our 10th version of it, and we got 12,000 entries this year. And they always teach us things we don't know, because we say to kids over and over again, and this is the golden advice of Nick Kristof, who actually did a webinar for us once. Don't choose things you think you should care about to write about. Choose things you actually care about. And more to the point, choose something you have authority on to write about. So that's how we got winners like this one this year. A student whose father is incarcerated writes about what that means for kids all over the country who have parents who are incarcerated, and how it's actually a more devastating, wide-reaching thing than childhood asthma and gets none of the press. We also got a great editorial from a trans student who says that they're tired of being, quote, compared to a school shooter on the 7 o'clock news. And we got a wedgie war zone. We love this girl's title. She's a student journalist, student gymnast, who is irate at the different uniform standards for female athletes across sports. So you can see that, we're very happy. We love it when kids find something they want to write about and are passionate about it. Just yesterday, in time for this conference on purpose, we announced our full slate of contests this year. I believe you guys will recognize the art we used. We featured our 3 panelists. And the last thing I'm going to tell you before it's time for us to have some open question time is that for the first time ever, we are running a contest that is for teachers as well as teenagers. It's open to anybody who is an educator in any capacity in a secondary school or any student in a secondary school. And the notion that we're doing this is that the reason why we're doing this is to recognize the absolutely critical moment that schools are in right now. You have not stopped reading in the Times and everywhere else about the lingering effects of the pandemic, about the mental health crisis, about teachers leaving the profession, the book bans, the rise of AI, worries about learning loss that are kind of reported constantly. This, just the way we've always wanted teenagers to push back against narratives, we're kind of asking anybody who's in a secondary school now to look at the education reporting, not just our own, but everybody's, and say, what's left out? What isn't reported? What are the nuances? What's missing? What don't people know? How can you challenge some of the stereotypes you see? And that includes purposely what's joyful and meaningful to you about being a teacher as well, or a student, as well as what's hard. Just like our coming of age contest, send us anything you want. We'll have full rules, etc. soon. But the contest is open from mid-August to the end of September. And in our fantasies, some teachers and students will work together to do it, because you can work alone or with anyone you want. So we'll have a full curriculum coming up. And that is it for what I want to show you. And I am now going to stop sharing, and we're going to go to questions.
Thank you so much, Katherine. I think I share everyone's sentiment that I think the care and the emotion in which you do this work is inspiring and touching, and just it's amazing to see. And I think all teachers out there can relate. It's the emotion resonates. And of course, the students have been just amazing. And, you know, I was nervous there'd be no questions. You can see them just flowing in, and some came directly to me. So Allison and Gigi and Shashank, you've obviously made a real impact, your words and your art. So thank you so much for being here. So I do have some questions from the audience. I can say right now, I'm not going to get to all of them. So I'm trying to pull ones that weren't touched on before. So the first one that I'm going to ask you comes from one of our namely board members. So do you feel the things you mentioned, fascism, the culture wars, are affecting teen mental health as much as media that teen use? So I'm going to just echo that question in the sense that social media and media gets blamed for gets blamed for a lot of ills, a lot of teen mental health issues. Can you talk about how much you think the media is impacting you, or these things that are happening that you're mentioning that are impacting you? I don't know, Gigi, why don't you start, and then we'll go in a circle.
All right. I definitely think that the vitriolic politics have a negative impact, at least, you know, in my circles. Like, it's really scary, even though I live in Massachusetts, which is a pretty liberal state, to see all of this happening, you know, in the West and the South, you know, in places that are pretty close to us. And I just wonder, like, how long can we hold out as that, you know, as this liberal state? So there's kind of a bit of a dread mixed in with our interactions with politics. And I think that, like, America as a whole is just so chaotic and stressful and intense that it's really hard for us to just grow up and get strong.
That's really, really well said. Allison, Shashank, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I think to answer the question, that the effect would be the current issues that we talked about compound the issues we already have with the media we consume. Like, it just feels like we're in an environment of constant stress, and a lot of times it can be like debilitating for our mental well-being. But I feel like Gen Z does a good job of like staying hopeful. Like I remember like after Parkland, there was like a lot of protesters and a lot of grassroots movements from our generation. And people went to Washington to express their like protests and thoughts on the direction America is going in. So I remain hopeful that we're not completely hopeless in this landscape.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that. Allison.
Yes. Okay. So I definitely think like I agree with Shashank. Like, the presence of social media definitely does like amplify
Mhm.
all of like the pre-existing issues, and I think it is harmful, but I think that's why media literacy education is so important, because the way that teenagers use the internet and the way that teenagers navigate the internet is like basically like the main deciding factor of how it will affect their mental health. Because I think the internet, it's like it's so vast and there's so many things you can use it for. So I don't think it should solely be viewed as like a negative thing. I think it should just be viewed as like a very valuable tool, but you should also treat it with a lot of caution because it can be very harmful if you use it improperly.
Wow. You are all saying things that I wish I said as beautifully. Thank you. So what are some specific like daily habits that you feel that you might use, or teens around you, to kind of help you balance that engagement in important things, but also like protecting your mental health? Like, what are some things that you do? We can go in the same order if that's okay. Yeah, great.
All right. I generally try to limit my social media like exposure. And I try to only consume my news from specific sources that I trust. So I'm not looking for, information on stuff like on Instagram. If I'm going to look at the news, I'll look at my inbox where I get like news reports and stuff. Or I'll look at news apps. But I really I try to keep it separate. I'm not trying to like bring that into my, my Instagram feed or, my TikTok feed, like, because I don't want to be consuming it there.
Yeah, that's very healthy.
I agree with Gigi. Like I try limiting my dosage of news too, because I feel like a lot of it just makes you angry or sad or anxious. So I try limiting it. And also I agree with separating your social media from your news consumption, because I feel like on these like short form social media apps like TikTok and Instagram, that the news gets compressed in ways which harms the quality of the news, and the interpretations that are on those apps a lot of times are not accurate or are misleading. So
I'm just thinking about after this conference is over and how I'm going to go back and transcribe like every single thing you're saying and share it over and over and over again. This idea of just like, the clear idea of separating social media and your experience in social media with news, I think is something that as a media literacy educator, I think we've all thought about, but the way that you have naturally kind of done that on your own is really inspiring and really interesting. Thank you for thank you for sharing that. Allison, anything in addition?
I'm also pretty similar. Like I'll learn about news or I'll like watch the news, and then that's that. But then sometimes I'll go on social media, like I'll go on Twitter or TikTok, and then I'll like search up like a hashtag, and then I see how people are like interpreting it. And I think like doing that helps me like develop a more like nuanced view on some things, because there are things that like you only get from other people like sharing their opinions, So I think I use it in combination, but I try to only get my facts from like reputable sources and not just like social media and stuff.
What would you say, Allison, is how do you navigate what are reputable sources?
Well, I just like search up like I forgot what the name is, but there's like a pyramid or some like website where it like sorts news from like bias to most bias. So I use that first. And then yeah, I use NPR, I use New York Times, but I try to figure out if a website is biased first before using it.
And just the bias chart, because it's coming in the chat, because that's they're part of the media literacy community. Like, how did you discover that? Was that through school, or did you?
Yeah, a teacher,
Great.
introduced it. Mhm.
So, Katherine, this is kind of leads into a question that's really more focused for you. And one of our attendees talked about just kind of the pushback she gets in a very, kind of right-leaning district about even using New York Times in the classroom, and see, this kind of narrative around New York Times being like liberal propaganda. What you must hear that clearly, and I'm sure you've had teachers ask you this question. How do you suggest teachers kind of respond to that in a quick kind of,
I honestly, I'm
effective
not
way?
gonna lie, Michelle, I was like, someone's gonna ask me that question, and I do not have a great answer. In
Interesting.
one way, I'll tell you why. I feel very humble. I haven't been in the classroom in 17 years. I mean, I go in classrooms all the time, but
Yeah.
I haven't been a teacher myself in 17 years, right? I've been doing this job. I think I just want to be humble enough to say nothing I can say from sitting inside 628th Avenue, the New York Times building, is meaningful in Florida or wherever, because what teachers are fighting is huge. Now, for a couple of years, we had a cadre of sort of Times fellows. We had 100 teachers a year who were enthusiasts from across the country. And so I'll tell you things they have recommended, but one size does not fit all, I'm sorry to say. One thing I think is that, if you're just gonna make a stereotype about the Times, you're thinking about front page news, you're thinking about our coverage of politics, or our op-ed page, like the way you think of the Wall Street Journal's op-ed page. The New York Times is 1,700 journalists strong. We're one of the only newspapers that has journalists in every place around the globe, et cetera, right? There's all kinds of materials in there that doesn't carry what some might consider a slant or whatever. I did not touch on our single most popular feature, and I think it's most popular in some ways because it doesn't carry a lot of politics, and it's also open to everyone. It's something called What's Going On in This Picture. It's just a nice way into the Times. We take a fun picture. Some of it is, you have to look through the collection, but we take a fun picture, strip it of its caption, and kids come on live in a visual literacy way and talk about, what do they see? What's their evidence? What do you see? What do you see that makes you say that? And teachers love it. We get 1,000 kids every Monday discussing it, and we have an organization that live moderates it. A lot of the teachers we've worked with over the years have said that schools find that so valuable that it's been a gentle introduction to the Times as a teaching tool across, because you can find it on all subject matter. You could use it in science class, et cetera.
Right. Yeah.
But I end this just by saying, I'm well aware that's not a great answer, and I don't have a great answer. We live in tricky times.
No, but I do think in some ways this idea of I'm not using the New York Times coverage of politics or this and that. I'm actually just using some visuals. There might be a way to kind of navigate that trickiness. Well, we're at the top of the hour. I wish we had more time. There are some questions here that I'm starting to think that I might gather, and maybe whoever, there's so many teens participating this weekend, I might ask for some written responses, some sharing on a deeper level. So thank you so much for being here, Katherine. Thank you for the work that you do. I am so excited to see what Gigi and Allison and Shashank do next. And we're really just appreciative of you being here, and congratulations on your beautiful work. I have to say that this is on my desk on a daily basis, because sometimes I like to just look and get inspired. So thank you all so much. I'm going to end our session with some just conference business before we go to our breakout. As you know, you get ready to engage. We hope in lots of wonderful professional development. We wanted to thank our conference sponsors for their support of media literacy education. We take pride in keeping this conference accessible and affordable, and the support of our sponsors, of course, makes this possible. And let me tell you, just spend a moment on our conference platform. When you go to our lobby, you're going to be able to check out all the sessions. You can create an itinerary. You can visit the expo floor, check out our speakers, and keep an eye on that lobby chat. Take time to update your profile with info about yourself. And if you're a speaker, make sure to edit your speaker profile. And besides checking the lobby chat for information and reminders, we're also going to be giving out some awesome, namely raffle prizes to some lucky attendees, people who attend the most sessions, those that fill out the most survey sessions, and they'll also, session survey responses. And we'll also be asking some namely trivia questions. So meet us over in the lobby. We'll also be linking to a Padlet where you can reflect and respond to sessions and conversations. And now let me just take a minute to remind you of our community standards. Stay actively engaged. Please hear presenters through their lenses. Engage in honest and respectful dialogue. Accept discomfort that you might feel as an element of growth. Think about perspectives of marginalized voices who may not be present, and invite new voices to join us. And don't forget these virtual conference tips. Check your mute button. Make sure your meeting room isn't hearing anything you don't want it to hear. Chat away. Use the chat function as a way to participate. Each session speakers will either decide whether cameras are on or off, but the chat function could be a great way to communicate and participate. Use it respectfully and freely. And enjoy. We can't thank you enough for being here. We're so happy that you've joined us. And the best part of a virtual conference, of course, is kicking up your feet, wearing your pajama pants, bring your pet. We're so glad you're here. So let's get started with the rest of Friday's programming.